Our first question comes from Randy out of Texas, and he writes, what would you say if someone said that Jesus was a Palestinian?
I would say that he definitely was not. And the term Palestinian is a term that I think is very confusing when you look at its etymology, its history. Just remember that when Jesus walked on the earth, we're told in Matthew's account, when Joseph was met by an angel of the Lord after he had been away in Egypt, that it was okay to go back into the land of Israel. So God referred to the property as the land of Israel, and that's what it was really called in Jesus' day. I flip here to the back of my Bible, and there are some maps here, and it says Old Testament, the Old Testament in Moses' day, and there's just different maps of one sort. And one map says, map 5 says, Palestine in the time of Christ. I don't really like that. Now, I understand why they are using that term, and most English Bibles, have that, but it wasn't called Palestine in the time of Christ. It was called Israel. It would be better and more accurate biblically to write Israel in the time of Christ. So remember, as Jesus predicted in 70 AD, the Romans came down. They began to disperse the Jews. They greatly restricted them. Around 132, there was a guy named Bar Kokhba. We call it the Bar Kokhba revolt. Simon Bar Kokhba. Bar means son of in Hebrew. So Simon, the son of Kokhba, led a rebellion in 132 AD, and he was successful for about 3 years. It drove the Romans crazy. Ultimately, around 135, it was cleanup operations in 136. They wiped out all the Jews that were left. They renamed the capital of Jerusalem to Aelia Capitolia. In mockery to the Jews, they renamed Israel. They took this word Palestinia, the Latin word, which is a derivative of the word Philistia or Philistines, which were some of their worst enemies, and they called the place Palestine, as we have it in modern English. And so Palestine, with this new capital, Aelia Capitolia, was a place where the Jewish people were basically mocked. They were at that point spread across the world. And of course, Moses prophesied this. Jesus spoke of it. And it spoke to a region. And so even in the 20th century, through the rebirth of Israel, the Palestinians were Jewish people and Muslim people and Arab people. It was a regional term describing a landmass, and the Brits continued to call it that. Much like we live in a section of the country, the southern tier of the United States, and we're called Southerners. So this region and not the people was known as Palestine, and it applied to anyone and everyone who lived in that geographical region. So there's no such people who are Palestinian any more than there's a nationality of people or an ethnicity of people called Southerners. And by the way, I do a program once a month, occasionally twice a month, called Stand in the Gap Radio. And if you go to searchthescriptures.org, I kind of walk through this issue in some detail. But when Yasser Arafat came on the scene, he wanted to kind of change the meaning of the term. And I think his motivation, as much as anything, was to imply some kind of historical claim to the territory. That this is now like a racial group of people, some nation state. And that's false historically, it's false biblically. So to say that Jesus is a Palestinian is crazy. He's a Jew. Again, even Israel referred to a landmass, and it wasn't exclusively Jewish people in Jesus' day. It was run by the Romans since about 64 BC. They are in charge. There's a number of different groups and ethnicities that are referred to in the New Testament that live there. So Israel referred to a land mass that was promised to the Jewish people, but Jesus is a Jew. He's not a Palestinian, and anyone who would say that has a twisted view of Scripture. They don't even begin to know what the Scripture reveals about the Messiah.
Dr. Carl Broggi answers your questions about the Bible and living the Christian life Tuesday mornings at 11 on The Light, 88.7 FM, and online around the world at wagp.net.